I can see by my screen that we are currently live on YouTube. Good afternoon, Mr. and Mrs. America and all the ships at sea. This is the Senate Institutions Committee. Today is January 28th, 2021. We are having a discussion about the building known as 133 State Street in Montpelier today. I am Joe Benning, your chair of institutions. We also have Senator Ingalls from Essex Orleans, Senator McCormick from Windsor, Senator Mazza from Grand Isle, Senator Parent from Franklin County. I'm going to say this hopefully for the last time with respect to YouTube watchers. You do have the ability to make comments as you are watching. We would ask you to keep in mind that this is a family-oriented channel. And I do understand I won't be saying that much longer because our leadership has finally figured out they can put a disclaimer on and say nobody's allowed to comment anymore.
Good.
We'll leave that for the folks who want to argue about government transparency, but the upshot is I probably won't have to give that little recitation each time. Today we have several witnesses with us. The first that I have on the agenda is Commissioner Jennifer Fitch from BGS, and I think she's left the screen.
Yeah, she's having some technical difficulties, and she was wondering if Denise could let her back in.
Okay, Denise, did you get that message?
There she is.
Commissioner, you have to unmute yourself or connect with your audio button.
Can't hear us though.
She's trying to figure it out.
Yep.
Is there a number that she could call in?
I do not know the answer to that.
As an old man, it's gratifying to me to see a young woman have trouble with the technology.
Yeah, but her cat is circling in to fix the problem right now.
IT in all forms.
That could be a spy from HCI.
Jennifer, for what it's worth, I've just seen your mute button appear on the screen, so perhaps if you pressed it to get it off. Oh,
You're on the
trying
phone
to
now?
call in.
You're on the phone to me. Oh. Did you, look, Jennifer, can you hear me? Nod your head. No? Is your mute button on, lower left corner?
I neglected to bring in the lip reader for this operation.
That's why we got on early.
I suggest if she does not pick up her
This way.
laptop and throw it
There
across
you
the
go.
room.
You're in now.
You're in?
Can you hear
We
me?
should confirm. it.
Yes, we
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Sorry, I don't know what's going on. It says my speaker's not working. Can I hear you?
can. I
Can
don't know.
someone talk
Can
to
you
me?
hear us?
I don't
Can
know.
you hear us?
So I
Oh.
can't hear you.
Do you have
How do I
earphones?
hear you?
Do you have earphones?
Let me
that you
try this
plugged
and see.
You can't hear us, Joe, so you don't have to give suggestions.
Hold on. Can you still hear me?
Yes.
Hello.
Okay,
Can you
and
hear-
can I hear you?
Hello.
What are we saying?
Okay, all right, we got there. Sorry, I apologize. My computer's always been really problematic with sound.
All right, I went to the wrong meeting.
I normally defer to Senator McCormick's position.
Yeah, you will.
There you
Throw it out the
go.
window.
You do.
Who said
Apologize for
that?
that.
I didn't.
Commissioner, we keep blessing you with that label, and I'm not sure, eventually you have to come by and be confirmed. Is that your understanding as well?
This is
I don't
true.
know how this works.
Yeah,
Nobody has explained this process to me.
and
This
you're
has been my career.
and you're ignoring us. It's unbelievable. You know what I mean? God.
I
We'll
am being
see.
honest when I say I don't know how to do that.
Well, we'll follow up on that just to see.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I think this woman has demonstrated grace under pressure, and we should confirm her.
I appreciate that.
Okay.
And spoil Senator Mazza's fun.
Yes, don't do that. Gee.
We do a roasting before we confirm anybody. So
that's right.
I'm ready. Bring it on.
All right. We have a topic of 133 State Street up for discussion, and you are first on the list of witnesses. So whatever you would like to tell us, we're open to hear what you have to say.
And are we live? at
We
the
are
moment?
live.
Oh, we're
Yes.
live. Okay.
As opposed to dead, we are live on YouTube.
Well, thank you, Senator Benning, and to the committee for providing us the opportunity to come in today and to talk to you. This specifically relates to the language that was put into the general fund bill last session, which involved the legislative body taking exclusive use of many of our spaces within the Montpelier complex. And we will specifically get to 133, but there's a nice little history, I think, to share that would be important for the committee to provide full context. We have asked in the Budget Adjustment Act to redact the entire language. That includes redacting the language with respect to all of the spaces that were identified in the general fund from last year, but we'll get to why we're asking to redact it. So the legislature last summer and up to September worked with a third party to identify short and longer term spaces so that the committees could come back into session while still following all of the COVID-19 guidelines like social distancing, right? And the results of those studies came back early, actually in August, in the middle of August or so, towards the end. And it identified many spaces, both within the complex and within the central Vermont region. And of the spaces that were identified, several of them were already occupied by other branches of government and other agencies and departments. So they weren't overly viable. In addition to that, the legislature came to BGS and said, well, we would really like to be in the Montpelier complex. So as soon as Janet Miller, Sergeant at Arms, came to BGS, and that again was late in August, we got right on it. I grabbed my top directors, which included Mark O'Grady at the time, our Director of Planning and Property Management, as well as Joe Asia, who is our Director of Design and Construction. We got with Janet. We put this at the top of our priority list. And we went through all of our spaces within the complex, and we identified a lot of different viable candidates that could be utilized and be fit up for committee room spaces while still abiding by the COVID-19 requirements. The consultant used a 7-foot distance. COVID-19, CDC as well as BDH says 6, but we went and we used the 7-foot distance that the consultant used, and we identified many spaces in the complex. When we identified those spaces in the complex, it's important to note that it did not include the 5th floor of 133. So throughout that very collaborative process, when we got to the end and had identified viable spaces that basically both of the executive branch and the legislative branch had agreed upon, a few days later, the language that I'm referencing went into the general fund bill that not only took the spaces that we had identified at BGS as being viable candidates, but basically also included other spaces, including the 5th floor of 133. After that language went into effect, and we were doing this all along anyway, that language didn't go into effect until the end of September. And as the report from the independent third-party contractor indicated, decisions on the space needed to be identified at the beginning of September. Why that's important to this conversation is that ultimately what happened was we weren't able to start at the beginning of September in supporting the legislature to fit up the spaces. The goal was, right, you had CRF funds. We have CRF funds that came to the state, And we wanted to be able to spend that money and be able to occupy those spaces before the end of the year so that they could be eligible for CRF reimbursement. So that's important to the story. We didn't identify those spaces and sort of come to a conclusion on the spaces until the end of September. So we lost a month is what I'm getting at. So time is getting tight is really the message of the story in order to fit up these spaces on time. But we're BGS and we overcome pretty much any challenge that comes our way. And we took Sabrina Karish, which is one of our rock star project managers. We put her on many of our high profile capital projects, and we took her off all the other things she was working on. And we basically allocated her to make sure that we could get these spaces fit up in time. And sure enough, in true Sabrina fashion, that's exactly what she did. We utilized several retainer contracts and other methods basically to speed up that fit up process. And ultimately, I'm happy to say that we were able to fit up to all of the spaces that were identified. And again, we were working alongside the legislative branch by the end of the year, and they were occupiable, which means the legislature was able to seek CRF reimbursement for those spaces. So we feel really good about that. We really wanted to support the legislature and their success. Ultimately, we want to support successful outcomes for all of the different branches of government. So, so those spaces were fit up. At the end of the day, both the executive branch, we decided that, due to whatever's going on with the pandemic and the increase in cases, ultimately, the executive branch decided to continue to be remote to the extent possible, at least until the end of March. Shortly thereafter, the legislative branch also elected to go remote, at least up to, I think, the end of March as well. And so at the moment, these spaces that have been fit up are not being overly utilized or not being utilized for committee spaces. So at this point, really what our goal is, we'd like to redact the language. That being said, we would like to keep to our word, which we've been doing all along, to continue to support the legislature utilizing these spaces where the legislature, fit up for committee room spaces. That being said, we would like to have the opportunity to utilize the 5th floor of 133. We have a longer term space planning optimization proposal, concept plan, essentially, that allows us to save $2 million over the course of 10 years, as well as a potential of $1 million or more in revenue. And with our inability to utilize the 5th floor of 133, that plan right now is on hold, which means it jeopardizes our ability to save the $2 million and to potentially bring in $1 million more or so in revenue. So in terms of our goal of optimizing space, right, and reducing operational costs, the fact that we can't utilize the 5th floor is a hindrance to us. I will also note that of the 5th floor, there's only one space that would be large enough for a committee room. That is the ballroom. It's big and it's echoey. And it's not a great space for a committee room because it's really hard to hear each other if you're in that space. Other than that, all the other spaces on that floor are like small, either single offices, or it's kind of weird up there. It's like an office with kind of 2 rooms, if you will. But they wouldn't be viable candidates for a committee room. And in terms of the legislature fitting up that space, there was no fit up that BGS assisted with in terms of modifying the ballroom to turn it into a committee room. We did fit up other spaces alongside the legislature and supported them in that. And that really focused on the basement of 133, the connector between 111 and 109, and the 4th floor conference room in 109. So
Jen, I just need to interrupt you for a moment for a logistics problem. Catherine Benham, Denise is trying to get in. She's in the waiting room. We want to let her in. Sorry about that. You're on, I forgot, 4th floor.
4th floor of 109. So Marco, I'm going to yield the rest of my time to Marco Grady to sort of talk a little bit more about our longer term plans for the Montpelier space sort of optimization concept that we have ongoing. And just to let the committee know, we've already started that process. We started the process probably 18 months or so ago. So right now we were sort of in the midst of doing moves, and we're now on hold because all of the space or that one key space, the 5th floor of 133, we can no longer use it until we can have use of it again, which according to the language is after the biennium. So in theory, what's written into the bill for the next 2 years is we cannot touch that space. And with that, if there's any questions for me, I could take those right now, or we can yield to Mark to talk a little bit more about the longer term plan.
Let's pause to see if the committee has any questions. I don't see any hands. I will ask you to tell us, for the benefit of our newest member, as well as anybody from the public that may be watching, 133 State Street. If you are standing out in front of the State House, can you tell us where that building would be?
Yeah, so if you're and I apologize, I also didn't introduce myself formally, and I apologize for that. So my name is Jennifer Fitch, and I am the BGS commissioner. So apologize, that wasn't good. So if you're standing on State Street and the State House is in front of you, 133 is the building to the left that flanks the State House lawn, and tax is the department that's in there now. ADS used to be in there, but they were part of this larger term space plan, and they have since moved up to Dewey, which ultimately freed up the 5th floor for the next move that we were going to move into that space.
Is tax going to remain there?
That is correct.
Okay. With that, Mark, welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Mark O'Grady. I am the Deputy Commissioner of BGS. I was formerly the Director, I'm the Deputy Commissioner of BGS, formerly the Director of Planning and Property Management. So as Commissioner Fitch noted, we've developed this master plan for the Capitol complex, and it really focuses on reducing our footprint, reducing the amount of state-owned and leased space, really focusing on shared meeting spaces versus designated meeting spaces. And we do, and it encompasses all 3 branches of government: legislative, judicial, and the executive branch. We have identified space on the 1st floor, the vault area for the legislature, and there is funds available for a construction project now through a prior appropriation. So there's lots of moving pieces. All groups really within the executive branch are in play. We've identified several groups that could potentially occupy the majority of the 5th floor amongst boards and commissions. We've proposed to sell 3 properties along Baldwin Street, 7 to 9 Baldwin, 13 and 1460. There's lots of functional obsolescence due to their old antiquated designs. They just don't meet the modern workplace and our flexible workplace that we have today. We anticipate the proceeds from those sales would be over $1 million. I would say $1 million would be the floor. Could be up to 1.4-ish, right around there. We haven't identified or made public any of our groups, really just because the complexities of change management. And as soon as someone gets an idea they may be moving, it spreads like wildfire, it disrupts planning, and it creates a lot of unnecessary distractions. A lot of employees look at their workstations and they're as their second home. And the thought of moving really creates a lot of angst. So as Commissioner Fitch mentioned, our first move was with the Agency of Digital Services, moving up to the Dewey building on the National Life campus. And that was a significant, really, savings to the overall big picture. And then backfilling that space was next on the block. And that's where we're at now in the holding pattern for the Capitol Complex Master Plan.
Yeah.
Before the 2 of you leave, and while I've got Janet Miller on the line, we're going to raise to one of the top pieces of our priority list, conversation about Agricultural Committee on the Senate side getting a new room. And I just want to plant that as a seed with you right now, but we've got to have some more serious conversation and get that accomplished. With that, committee, any conversation or questions for Mr. O'Grady? I don't see anybody chomping at the bit. I want to thank you both for attending. You are, of course, welcome to stay. And my next witness I have up is Janet Miller.
Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Janet.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. I'll tell Senator Mazza I've taken over his room.
All right.
Well, yeah, I'm eating all your candy.
Good for you.
Yeah. So Janet Miller, Sergeant at Arms here at the Vermont State House, and thank you for asking me to come in. I'll just address one comment that I have first off to what Jennifer was talking about with the help that we received from Buildings and General Services to outfit these rooms. And she's correct in that Sabrina went gung-ho and helped us get this all set up. So we really do appreciate that. I think the question about the 5th floor, and my concern had been all along, and with talking with leadership previously, as the large ballroom, where I agree is not great for the sound of things up there, but it was the only space that the whole Senate would fit as a whole if you wanted to meet by yourselves, all 30 of you. So the Senate chamber right now only held at 27. But that was one of our thinking, that space could be holding for the Senate itself. It's also possible you could have used the House chamber, but that would have been some back and forth. And as we all know, at the present time, the House chamber, they couldn't fit all in that room in their House chamber anyway, because right now that only holds about 70. But I just wanted to make, those were some of our thinking. We still would have liked to use some of the offices up there for other space. We have a new position within the State House of an HR director that we don't really have anywhere to put them right now. Now, whether that be the place they land, I'm not sure at this point, but just to give you a little background on that. And I don't think I can say that the legislature knows what position will be in 2 months from now. And I don't know if we know even in 22. I'm hoping that everything will be fine, but does anybody really have a crystal ball to tell us that? And I know we'd all like to be back to normal, but to return all the rooms, including the 5th floor, I feel would be premature. And I'd like to just pose the question is, will there be a different kind of normal for employees and employers in general? And will workplaces be taking into consideration remote working, and is remote working for production while keeping employer costs down? So the legislature, as Jennifer said, was given these rooms for the whole biennium of 21 and 22. But I also think that the bigger conversation needs to happen in regards to some other things happening in the State House, and one being what you said, Senator Benning, is the committee room for Senate Agriculture. We also have to consider the new HVAC system that's being proposed by Buildings and General Services, and what space in the State House is going to be needed to accommodate that. We've also turned our coat room here into a committee room that perhaps will be used. So those are all things to consider, including the recent developments of security in state houses across the country. I know that Mark mentioned that in previous legislation, there was an agreement to use the 133 first floor space, and Buildings and General Services had some funds to outfit that for the legislature, but I'm not sure that will be enough at this time after all this discussion has taken place about the HVAC and all the other things. And I just would like to say, I know it may not be a popular sentiment to talk about 133 and any plans for expansion for the legislature, but in thinking it is the closest building to the State House if we ever decided that the legislature needs more space. And I would ask if the current plan for 133, which I know you can't divulge and stuff, but is that really, do those departments or specific people coming need to be close to the State House? And I will just put that out there because I think that also needs to be a bigger part of the conversation when the legislature gets more information from Buildings and General Services from the things I spoke about as far as the HVAC system. But that's
questions. I will say that I've had the same conversation with the court system right now about putting in a new HVAC system to accommodate the current COVID-19 press. And it seems kind of strange to me that with the vaccines coming in waves, in my brain, it would tell me I'm more intelligent if I don't spend the money on that, but rather get court staff vaccinated as a top priority. And then as each wave of cohort comes by, for instance, now it's 75 and up, you begin to build a coalition that would enable jury trials to start again. And there may be issues about a jury of my peers, and I'm going off on a tangent here, but it's somewhat similar to what you're talking about. The upshot is, in this day and age, after listening to Beth Pierce yesterday, we've got to be a lot smarter in how we spend money and when. And it doesn't make a lot of sense to me to be devoting a lot of money to new HVAC systems on a problem that is eventually going to be solved.
If I
But
could,
it's part and parcel of the conversation. Sure.
if I
Go
could just say, Senator Benning, so this whole HVAC system is, as you know, may or may not know, it's been going on for about 3 to 5 years now, and this was all part of the whole mold remediation project. And I think, I'm not certain, and maybe Jennifer can speak to this, but I think that there probably isn't any question that we still need to upgrade this HVAC system just for normal days at the State House.
So 2 summers ago, we had the building aerated on a regular basis. How is that mold situation now?
It's
Jennifer, kick in if you want. This is an open discussion.
Okay, great. Thank you. I appreciate that, Senator Benning. So just to give people a little bit of context, there's, and this may be going too deep, but there's 5 air handler units that are associated with the State House. 3 out of the 5 were installed in 1970 and are well beyond their service life. The other 2 were installed in 1995 and are coming to the end of their service life. And the biggest problem with the current HVAC system is that what it can't do is it can't what's called super cool the air. So the air comes in the summertime, right? It's humid. And so what happens is that you super cool it. That drives out all the moisture. And then, believe it or not, you heat it back up to your air conditioned temperature, and then you put it, then you distribute it through your building. So the problem right now is we don't have the ability to super cool it and heat it back up, which means all of the air conditioning that's coming in has a lot of moisture in it. And that's exactly how the mold builds up. In 2018, we ultimately spent $500,000 to remediate that mold. And today what we do, poor Janet Miller and our staff at the State House, but we have 52 dehumidifiers that we put out in the summertime now. And it costs an additional $77,000 a year in dehumidification, and 2 staff for me for 6 hours a day to go and dump all those buckets of water. So it's not a good sustainable system. And so to Janet Miller's point, she's correct. This has been a longer term replacement that BGS has been recommending for those reasons.
Okay. So forget everything I just said about HVAC at the State House. The other question, though, was the mold situation. How are we?
We're good, but that's been because, we've been using the 52 dehumidifiers and having staff dedicated to dumping those. So really, you just have to stay on top of it in the summertime when it's really humid outside. And we work really closely with the Sergeant at Arms because another component of that, right, is keeping the door closed on really humid days and things like that. So we've really been partnering to do whatever we can do to control the humidity within the State House.
Okay. Mark?
And just the location of the summer boiler is where Ledge Council is, and that is a very, very muggy area. So it would solve that problem with those employees having better workspace as well.
Are they a possibility for 133 State Street?
So the other thing that's I think important to share about our space plan, right, is that it was in concept, right? So we took a look at all 3 branches of government, recognizing that there were space needs. And we recognized that we felt that 133, to Janet's point, the first floor server room was a good option for them because A, it already had money, right? It's always nice to have money on the table to fit up space for your needs. And B, is really close to the State House. And so we had identified that space. We are still planning to offer that up to the legislature and planning to provide our project management services to get it fit up for them. And so, yes, Mark is correct. We are going to need to, the location of the summertime boiler should be where Ledge Council is. It actually used to be a utility space. And unfortunately, it's a really moist space because we get water coming off the ledge. And so again, that's another place where we're constantly trying to dry that moisture that's coming into that area. And it's also slightly below grade, and we don't particularly allow or appreciate employees being below grade because it's just not a great place to work. And so we would want to get them out of there regardless, but it's a great time for a summertime boiler. And that's that thing that I talked about. Once you cool it down, you got to heat it back up. And that's what that summertime boiler does.
Sounds like a great environment for growing things, like an agriculture committee, maybe. Okay, anything else, committee questions? I don't see anybody raising hands. Kevin Moore, I see you're on the screen and you had been listed as a witness. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Senator Benning, committee. Thank you for taking the time to invite me to the conversation. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Kevin Moore. I'm the Director of IT for the General Assembly. I'm not sure how much I can add to the conversation that's been had so far, but I certainly want to alert the committee to the level of work that has gone into the spaces, 14 spaces dedicated for socially distanced committee rooms should the legislature decide to come back. We spent about $110,000 in total out of the CARES Act dollars in order to fit up those spaces with technology, everything from networking to video conference solutions, wireless networking, hearing assistance. There's a variety of different things there. As a current resident, the IT office occupies 9 Baldwin Street. We're certainly interested to see where the plans are for us to relocate if this building is on the chopping block to be sold. Certainly we would want to understand that. And we would certainly want to understand as soon as possible what, if any, changes would be taking place as far as staff relocations, so we can properly plan for those as well to make sure that the technology is ready for the employees to be relocated to those spaces. This is certainly an important conversation. I think I'm a very small part of this conversation. I'm happy to answer questions if there are any to be had, but this is certainly something I would be concerned about if we were to release these spaces. Where are we going to relocate this equipment should the legislature decide to return in the near future?
So, Jennifer, I'm going to turn back to you at this point. I know we had a conversation about a couple of buildings on Baldwin Street, and I don't have access to my committee room right now. What is the plan for the buildings that had been talked about for being put up for sale, like the one Kevin's in?
So I'm going to yield my time here to Mark because he's the one that can speak better to that. But I just want to, as part of my testimony, be really clear. We want to honor the spaces that have been set up for the legislature. We don't want to take those back. We're not interested in taking back. We want to, do whatever we can do so that the legislature can be successful and come back in person, because I know, just like I do with my own staff, right? It's better to meet in person than it is to be remote. And we understand that. And we want to do whatever we can do to support the successful outcomes of the legislature. All we're asking is basically to be able to have the 5th floor of 133 back so that we're able to continue our planning process. And again, save that $2 million and get that $1 million in revenue. So we want to honor those spaces. We do not want to take those spaces back from the legislature. I just really want to be clear about that. The ones that have been fit up for committee spaces, we don't want to take those back. It's really the 5th floor of 133. Sorry, Mark, I'm going to yield to you on the questions about the Baldwins.
Sure. Well, first, I think it's important to point out we don't have permission to sell them. So before the legislature grants us permission, we would have to satisfy their relocation needs. In any space that we would find, you'd have to check the box off that it meets their programmatic needs. In our plan, we have created homes for the folks that are currently located in those spaces. We also definitely recognize that Ledge IT has a need to be very close to the State House. So those are all considerations that we have made when we put the plan together. There's a lot of moving pieces, but a lot of folks that are in these, for instance, a group may have a large conference room. Well, do they really need their own conference room? How often do they really use that? We took into consideration, can we share those types of spaces?
Can you just remind me what buildings we were talking about and who is actually in them now?
Sure. 7 to 9 Baldwin is Ledge IT. 13 Baldwin Street is Labor Relations in VOSHA, I believe. 14, 16 is a mix of groups. There's Human Rights Commission, the Transportation Board, Green Up Day. The Agency of Human Services has 2 or 3 offices. And then there's a large conference room.
Is that where the Defender Generals is too?
Defender Generals in 6 Baldwin.
6 Baldwin, okay. Committee, any other questions? Senator McCormick.
Do we have the capacity? Do we have the space already? It's just a matter of moving from less appropriate to more appropriate space, or do we have to acquire more space?
No, we will not need to acquire additional space.
Okay. That's my question. Thanks.
So Janet, the 75 and above cohort is being vaccinated now. I think that means about what, 40% of the Senate will be back in shortly?
No comment. I don't know the ages.
All right.
Record.
I thank you all for coming. I also see that we had Catherine and Rebecca, Eric Philcorn. I don't know if any of you wanted to weigh in on this conversation.
Sure. This is Catherine Benham with the Joint Fiscal Office. I think you've touched on all the topics. I think I would just suggest that it's actually the legislature needs to figure out what its space needs are. That's a big piece of this, whether it's the Senate Appropriations Committee room, the issue with the HVAC, this moving people around and who would move where. It's an important discussion to have, and the implication of having a space near the State House is pretty critical for whoever has to move out. So I would just be mindful of that before you make any decisions. And I think, who knows what work is going to look like in a year from now. How many people will continue to work remotely in both, I don't know, in the legislature, but also in state government. People's needs may be very different. So it's like everything, we're living in a very uncertain world. So I would caution you all to think a little bit about what your needs are as a legislative body.
Yeah. I don't know if you were on the screen earlier, but I did say that Bobby Starr's been whining long enough and we've got to get him a committee room. So that's going to be a little higher on the priority list for us to be thinking about. I'd like to get that done as soon as we can.
And I sit in that committee room in the morning, so.
There you go.
Well, and if you find a space in the State House for that committee room, you will obviously displace somebody who will then need to go someplace, and it would be ideal to have them closer than further to the State House, I think. So it's not, I think the Sergeant at Arms spoke to how many, it touches on a lot of different people and offices and committees. So it's worth trying to figure out. I'm also mindful that the commissioner's trying to manage money and lease space. I don't know when those leases are due, but there are times, I think there's a little bit of window to talk through some of these things and figure out what makes sense as a whole.
Why don't we send Bobby to Waterbury?
Well, I was going to say that as far as the Senate is concerned, you could pick any House committee room you want and just get them out of here. But Janet, I'm kind of curious. You are operating right now out of the coat room?
No, I'm in Senator Mazza's room.
No, I mean, I know where you are right now, but
Oh.
Generally speaking, are you operating out of the coat room or are you back in?
No, I'm still in my regular room. It's room
Okay.
2. Yep.
And what's going on with the coat room right now?
So now that's been turned into a space with social distancing. So we've taken the mailboxes out of there, and it can now hold a committee of, I think, 10 at this point. So the only, when we speak about putting Senate Ag in different places and all, the other thing to keep in mind is then we lose the coat room. And I know that might kind of sound trivial, but it it's still an issue because when all the people come in and this is their workplace too, such as lobbyists and people that spend their day here, they'd be dragging their things all over, and there may not be. I know a lot of the members keep their belongings with them or in their committee rooms.
Well, I'm just wondering how we divide that room to accommodate both and still be architecturally kosher with the folks that are friends of the State House. And
well, I think there were some plans for that Freeman, French and Freeman may have touched on in either the space, I think it perhaps was the space study, but I think it doesn't come with a cost. And then the whole COVID thing happened, and should
Right.
that be addressed now? But it is up for discussion, I would imagine.
Okay, Senator Mazza.
Didn't we discuss at one time that the mail room would be eliminated entirely and we'd have pages deliver the messages, and that would eliminate the mail room? Then we'd all have to concentrate on a smaller portion for their coats, because a lot of committee members can bring their coats in their own rooms. It would just be for the visiting folks. So I thought there was enough room in there to accommodate the Agriculture Committee without the mail room, because the mail room I understood was no longer needed if we had the pages deliver our mail. Or
Yeah, I think that's true because members get less and less mail now. It's a lot.
So
And
that takes up a lot of space. And
so we have removed the mailboxes out of there, so it is bigger space. But with the COVID restriction, it's still not as big.
Right. But if we didn't have COVID, I think there would be enough room for Bobby's committee and a small coat room. I think there'd be enough in there. Seems like there'd be enough, bigger than he has now.
Well, that's saying something. I don't know.
But
yes,
there's really only two things I'd miss from the mailbox. One is the Fish and Wildlife calendars. The other is that big hunk of chocolate we get on Valentine's Day. But other than that,
we'll have it delivered to you personally, Joe. Yeah.
All right, that works for me. Anybody else want to weigh in on this conversation?
You notice Catherine skiing today? She's in the background skiing. Look at this. See,
She needs a wide world of sports jacket.
Yeah, she doesn't need an office. She's skiing right now. See that?
All right.
I did have something I just wanted to mention for the record. Becky Wasserman, Legislative Counsel. I don't think I heard this, but I did want to remind the committee that the Capitol Bill last year, you all put in language that said about the office relocations for any space used by the legislative branch, that the commissioner of BGS has to get approval from the Joint Legislative Management Committee, and that committee would consult with the chairs of institutions. So I think whatever decisions are made, there's a sort of an additional step with that committee approving any relocations.
Did the Joint Legislative Management Committee get reconstituted?
I don't think the answer.
I don't think the members have been named yet.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. Good point. Anybody else have any thoughts? Well, thank you all very much for coming. We will see you again.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having us.
Good job, Jennifer.
Yep.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to being confirmed at some point, right?
You're getting close now. Yeah.
All right. I'll keep working on it.
You got to get some chocolate for Joe.
Yeah. Actually, Becky, are you still there? Did Beck leave already? Catherine, you're still on. Could you ask Becky to figure out exactly when Jennifer is supposed to get confirmed, how that process works?
Sure, I can do that.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank
you. Governor will send it to the Senate, and the Senate sends it down. So,
right. All right, guys. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That's all I've got. Denise, you hang on the line as we cut out, if you would.
Okay.
Committee,
Thank you,
we'll see
everybody.
tomorrow.
Everybody have a good day. Have a good night.
So for tomorrow's purposes,
Yes.
I'm getting buzzed here. Hang on a second. Corey Parent says he got kicked out. Wait a minute.
Yeah, I did.
Well, let me respond to him.
Tell them we ended.
Yeah. We are done. Okay, that takes care of him. Tell me what days you've got occupied for next week, if you would.
Get all of them occupied in one way or another.
Okay.
Okay. Pensions and reports, that would be Adam on Tuesday.
Yep.
I have not heard back from Dave Sheets, but I asked him if he could come in at 2:30. And Wednesday, we've got that whole bunch of people from Woodside regarding Woodside. And Thursday, we have that Lori Emerson and her group on a mental health in the time of COVID.
Yep.
And Friday, Jennifer Fitch and Eric Philcorn will be doing a broad overview of the Capitol bill.
Okay. Then I think we're good.
Okay.
Anything else I need to know about? Otherwise, I'm going back to this guy getting extradited to New Jersey.
Okay, send him back. If he's a bad guy, send him back.
I can't think of a better place to send him than New Jersey, actually.
I know. You native.
Yep.
Okay, I will chat with you tomorrow.